Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Ashley Audrain is the author of The Whispers, a novel. This is actually one of my Zibby's book club picks for this fall. So be sure to join Zibby's book club, which you can read about on zibbymedia.com, and attend our book club where we can discuss The Whispers, and then we'll have a Q&A with Ashley about the book. Doesn't that sound like fun? Why would you not want to join? Come on, you can do it. Anyway, Ashley Audrain's debut novel, The Push, was a New York Times, Sunday Times of London, and #1 international bestseller and a Good Morning America book club pick. I had Ashley on for The Push as well. It has sold in more than 40 territories, and a limited television series is currently in development. Ashley previously worked as a publicity director of Penguin Books Canada. Prior to that, she worked in public relations. She lives in Toronto, where she and her partner are raising their 2 young children. Welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for coming back on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss The Whispers, which, as I was just telling you, I have not been able to put down. I've been carrying it around into cars, out of cars, don't talk to me right now kind of book. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Zibby, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, tell listeners what The Whispers is about.
Sure. So The Whispers is about 4 neighboring women who live on Harlow Street, and they don't quite realize the ways in which their lives are connected until there's a tragedy that happens one night on the street. And that tragedy sort of acts as this thread, that's pulled, and all of the women's lives kind of unravel in different ways. And they're forced to face secrets they've long kept, and they're forced to sort of face the whispers they have long ignored in their lives, and realize ways in which they are indeed quite connected. Yeah.
So interesting. I know I've been shocked a couple of times.
Oh, good. That's good.
Not to mention the one, I don't want to give anything away, but the whole situation on the bed,
Yes. Yeah.
I was like, no, this is not happening. Stop. And then I was like, where is Ashley coming up with this?
Yes, that is a scene. Yes.
Okay, well maybe this is your deepest, darkest secrets coming to haunt us all.
I know. I was joking with my friends that nobody will ever let me house sit for them again, I'm sure, but that's okay.
Oh my gosh. So there's so much to discuss about this book. There are so many takes on motherhood. I feel like all of this is like not a referendum, but some sort of exploration of different types of motherhood and, what it takes. Are you the type of mom who wants everything to look good but not be there? And in fact, or do you want to devote yourself completely 100% and lose another part of yourself? Or, is it to your kids' advantage or not? That's the other thing. It's like, are we all doing our kids a service? Or are we hurting them with our parenting? So maybe just start with mothering in general, parenting in general, and what you were hoping to sort of tease out with some of these narratives.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I did sort of want to, especially with the characters, we hear from the perspective of 4 women, I should say, in the book. And 3 of them are women sort of in midlife. And one of them is an 80-year-old neighbor sort of watching it all go down. And 2 of these women in particular, who we hear from, Blair and Whitney, are polar opposites, when it comes to mothering and parenting. And I had so much fun writing them. They are best friends connected through their children. And I think that's such an interesting relationship, like the mom friend, so often we become friends with women who maybe we would not normally in any other circumstance, but we're connected through our kids, because they're in the same year at school, or in this case, they live across the street from each other and become quite close. And I think that, we talk about the different kinds of parents and different kinds of mothers. And so often often I think we like learn about ourselves as mothers in the reflection of other people, like we sort of mother in relation to each other a lot. I don't know if you found that with your kids, but, so often you'll look at another mom and you'll admire something so much, about the way that she mothers or the way she is with her kid or the decisions she's made. And it really makes you look at your own life and think like, am I, it's a lot of comparison. Am I measuring up to that? Maybe you've made completely different decisions. And that's also a reflection, to kind of stop and think, why we've made the decisions we have as parents. And so these two women, they're really at the opposite ends. We have Blair, who gave up everything in her life, basically, by choice, willingly, happily to stay home and raise her daughter. And she was quite satisfied by that, for a long time, until she kind of hit this midlife point. Her daughter's a little older. She's feeling less needed, and sort of taking a look around and thinking, well, what do I have left? Like, how did I get here? And who really am I? And what am I going to do about that? And then we have Whitney across the street, who has 3 kids and really can honestly say she does not love being a mother. She would rather stay at the office late, to prep for a presentation the next day than to go home and deal with bedtime and bath time and all of that. And so I think they're such an interesting pair because, Whitney will often say, and she says in the book, like, sometimes I just want to be with Blair because it like helps me think about my children. It helps me feel more maternal, and then vice versa. We hear Blair want to be with Whitney because she's just craving something else. And she thinks Whitney's so interesting and has so much going on in her life. And so, it was, they sort of act as a foil to one another in terms of their mothering.
And I think Whitney keeps Blair around just to make her feel better. Blair's always pumping her up. And, she's like the one you need to get encouragement when really she doesn't even deserve the encouragement. Not that we don't all deserve encouragement. And then you have Rebecca, who I think might be my favorite. Not that I'm supposed to pick favorites, but Rebecca is, trying-ish, has been having a really hard time with miscarrying babies and just mourning and longing and going through that whole thing, but also pushing her body to the limits as a doctor and going to the edge of sleep over and over. And just like, there was one moment where you're like, she had to splash cold water on her face just to be able to like work through the tiredness and all of that.
Yes.
And yet she's the one taking care of everybody else. And that gives us a view into what's happening with Xavier. But anyway, I kind of loved Rebecca's view on everything. So tell me a little bit more about creating her character.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of people that Rebecca, is her favorite, and she is their favorite. Rebecca is the character. She's the woman who lives on the street who does not have a child. As you said, she is sort of desperate to have a child of her own, and she can get pregnant quite quickly, but she experiences pregnancy loss. She's had this historical pregnancy loss over and over. And I thought it was a bit cruel, to give Rebecca this profession that she has, and also suffer from what she does, in her health, because she goes to work every day, saving other people's children. She's a physician in an emergency room at a children's hospital. And so that is what she does every day, look after other people and other people's children. And yet, can't have this experience herself. And I've always been a little bit fascinated by physicians, by healthcare professionals and doctors. I know you're nodding along. I think it's probably because our minds are working completely different ways. But, her every day and all in her natural way of thinking is guided by reason and, what is rational and fact and answers to questions. She's a scientist. And yet for her own health problem, she sits across the table from a doctor, who says, well, sorry, we just don't have any answers. We know that women's health, reproductive health is, hugely underfunded and under-researched. And that's the reality for many women, right? They don't get answers. And sort of the advice is to hold on to hope. Hope for a miracle. And that's not Rebecca's way of thinking. That is not how she has spent her, 38 years on Earth. So yeah, I think she's facing, that particular challenge. And I had, a lot of discussions with editors and whatnot about how much of this pregnancy loss, to put on the page. Like she's kind of recounting these pregnancy losses that she's had in the past. And, it's so interesting. Like I had miscarriages when I was having my children. And I remember sort of after being sort of like stunned by how truly foreign, that experience was. And, and it sort of occurred to me that like, well, this is like the specifics of it. We do not share. You do not see it on the page. You definitely do not see it on screen. It's this, thing that happens that we very much just skip over, to the next scene, the next chapter. And I think we do that because, miscarriage to me is one of those things that makes other people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so as women, we silence ourselves about it or we don't share about it. And so I just wanted to put a bit more of what that really feels like, on the page with Rebecca kind of recounting what that's been like. That was important to me with her character in this book.
Well, that absolutely came through. And I'm sorry about your own miscarriages and the pain and the loss and the visual stuff and the body stuff and all of it. When she buried the fetus, oh my gosh. I mean, it's like, it was really, it's tough to read because it's obviously so real and comes from such a place of, understanding and empathy and all of that, but just bereft, and it happens all the time, it happens all the time. So
it does. And I think the other thing with Rebecca is like, I think that unless you've been through it, you might not realize how completely all consuming it is. And we get to see that through Rebecca. She has to go to work every day. She has to function. She's trying to have this family. She's trying to do all these things, her marriage, everything. And she just cannot stop thinking about it. She cannot stop. Her mind is stuck there. And I think for a lot of women, that's exactly how it feels. You sort of move through your day going through the motions, but all you're thinking about, is how much you wish you were still pregnant or when you can get pregnant next or, watching the calendar, counting the days. That's such a reality for women, I think.
And you brought up in the book too, this 3-month code of silence. It actually makes it so hard because before 3 months, we don't tell anybody. But then when you lose the baby and people are like, how are you? You have to be like, I'm fine, but yesterday I was pregnant, today I'm not pregnant, but I can't tell you any of this. So like, I don't know. Then there's immediately a wall that goes up. You can't be intimate really with anybody because you're always hiding secrets.
It's a strange thing, isn't it? It's a strange thing that we've arrived at this, or we've been in this place for a long time, in society and culture where you just don't talk about it for 3 months, and that rule comes from this place where, well, you might lose the baby and then what? Well, the answer is, well, and then everyone around you feels uncomfortable. Then everyone doesn't know what to say. Like that to me, there's such a disconnect there between, and we uphold that so strongly still. It's so interesting, and I like even, sometimes people will tell you they're pregnant before 3 months and you sort of go, ooh, like you sort of feel a little bit like you almost don't, you feel worried for them. And it's such a strange thing that we have not got past. We have not, evolved with that for some reason.
Well, also this instinct to protect ourselves from pain, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like that, it doesn't work. It's not like you're like, oh yeah, okay, it's before 3 months. It doesn't hurt then because I knew it was coming. Like it's still hurt. Anyway, whatever.
In fact, it's even more painful, right? Because you are grieving and nobody knows and you can't share that with anyone. And yeah.
Anyway, but that's only one small part of this whole story. When I think back on the push, for your last book and this book, there is this undercurrent of like, the out of control feeling that every parent sort of feels at times, this frustration and where the mind goes to the worst. Like, what if you just lost that last bit of control when you're angry or upset? And like, what if you go too far? Then what? Like, of course, and you show it in the book, like, of course you love your kids. Everybody loves your kids, but like everyone has those breaking point moments. And I would say 99% of people that go reel themselves right back and be like, oof, gosh, that was really got angry there. I'm glad glad they went to school or I don't know. Something, or glad nobody saw me. When I was reading this book, I have a neighbor across the hall and I was like, oh my gosh, does she hear me like screaming when the kids are 5 minutes late? Like, get in the car, it's so embarrassing. And then like, you just have to pack up and move on. But anyway, you explore that instinct and like sort of the most generous with the most hurtful. And I don't know, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Yeah. I think it's exactly what you said. We've all experienced that. And I think that we live so much more of our lives as mothers in that space of like being on the brink than we would all like to, right? And we've all had that experience of like, yelling at our kids and then turning around and being like, God, someone's standing a little too close, and they definitely heard that. Or like the neighbors being in the backyard, having dinner, and you realizing, oh God, like I left the doors open and I'm yelling at everyone to like, wash their hands or whatever. Yeah, and it's so interesting to me. Like that feels like such a bare exposure. Like you might as well be standing naked in front of these people. After someone hears you get angry. And it's so interesting that like I think we still feel such shame as women around anger. And like that starts so young, right? Like I have a daughter who's 5 and I catch myself all the time, like when she's angry, when she's mad, when she just wants to throw things, like trying to temper her, and there's this real like uncomfortability around it. And this whole message of like being a good girl, that like we don't necessarily give our sons, or we don't necessarily act the same way with our sons. And so it starts so young, this shame and embarrassment around anger. And I think think, for so much of this book, I was revising during the pandemic, and that, we all know that was a disastrous time for so many of us, for so many different reasons and in different ways. But I think for a lot of us that had little kids at home, which I know you did too, anger was a daily thing, like rage, anger, frustration, and it was at the world at large and circumstance out of our control, and then trickled down to, trying to do a math problem with our kids or trying to get them to sit in front of a Zoom, for school. And that was really a conversation that I was having every single day with my friends at that time. Like, why am I so angry? Why am I so mad? Where are my patients? And I think a lot of that, has sort of come out in Whitney's character, sort of as I was kind of thinking a lot about this at that time. Like, we were all feeling it. And Whitney certainly struggles with that. She has one son in particular who is like very triggering for her. He's like this match that gets lit under her. And it's almost like everything he does like irritates her to a level, that's heightened, like beyond, aside from beyond from her other two kids. And I just think that's, as you said, hopefully we all, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, we walk ourselves back, right? And we can talk ourselves out of it. But Whitney is someone who has a really hard time doing that, really hard time coping with what to do with that anger. And so that becomes this sort of inciting incident in the book, but then we see it, throughout these times when she just has to really cope with like how this feels and what that, what that says about her and what, the self-reflection she does because of that.
Well, I think we're also all so highly attuned to when we hear other moms do it, because every so often we do hear something that like pushes the boundary a little. Like I remember seeing a mom yell at her daughter in one of my kids' classes on the street, and I was like, ooh, but that's a little too much. And now I don't, and there was like physical stuff involved, and I was just like now I'm a little more, this is more than just we're angry and we're late.
Yes, exactly.
And then what do you do? I don't know. And then it's like, what do you interfere? Like, I'm not going to interfere. I barely know this woman, but like, I still, that you're unsettled because like here you are in the community and you see something and it's like, well, maybe this isn't okay. So
yeah, maybe it isn't okay. Exactly. I think we've all had that too, where we've heard something or witnessed something that's just, we've gone home and it has not sat right. And like, we don't feel good about it. And it doesn't mean we don't have empathy for that mother. We all do. We all know, but there is. And I think that's actually really what Blair struggles with in the book with Whitney. She has almost seen too much and she knows a little too much and she's uncomfortable with it. And yet there's this power imbalance in their relationship, where like Whitney is the stronger, more confident, cooler mom, and Blair doesn't have nearly as much, confidence as her, even though she feels like a more capable mother. And so there's this power imbalance where like Blair would never feel like she could call out Whitney on her behavior because it would ruin too much, there's too much at stake in that relationship. Between them. And yet we see how, Blair throughout the book is sort of pushed to kind of really have to confront this. And what is she going to say? And what is she not going to say? And what do they rely on each other for? Whitney also sort of knows that like Blair's not bold enough to say anything. And so what secrets can be safe with her, So that part of their friendship is really interesting to write about too.
And then we have Mara, who I also found really interesting. And your description of how her mothering with her son, I'm forgetting her son's name. What was her son's name again? Marcus. Yeah. Her son, Marcus, and his autism or we don't know what it is unless it comes out later. I told you I have a couple pages left to go, but that she has to stay sort of glued to him his whole life and his descent, and how at one point she asks her husband, Albert, like, we need to spend some money on a specialist. There might be something wrong. And how that was such a big deal. And how so many people just take it for granted that like when their kids start going off the rails, like there will be help around. But what if there's not? And so for so long there wasn't even good, childhood mental health stuff available. Anyway, tell me a little bit more about Mara and sort of the old neighborhood into the new and and her own stuff that happens to her that was like, anyway.
I know. Yes. I really love Mara as the character probably closest to my heart, just in terms of, writing her story and, a couple of things about her. So yes, her son, Marcus, has selective mutism, which actually is an anxiety disorder. And so he chooses, he will not speak unless he's in like a very comfortable situation. And that is only with his mother. And so he won't speak around his father. He won't speak at school. He won't speak to anybody else. And he sort of freezes up, and has this great anxiety and sort of can't function. person, like another child his age. And so, yeah, she really sort of feels like this great protector of him, that she is the champion of him. She is the only one who is going to ensure his well-being. She knows her husband is never going to have a relationship with him, because of the judgment that he cannot shake. And that, I wanted to write about just how hard that is for her, how hard that is as his person, throughout life to be the only one, who can do anything, for your child. That is just a really hard, position to be in, and also wanting the world to see the good in him that she does, but she knows that is very difficult. So that's sort of her backstory with her son. And we meet her when she is in her 80s, and she is, the neighbor, one of these neighbors on the street. And this was very much inspired by, at the time that I was writing the book, I lived in this neighborhood called Little Portugal in Toronto. And I had neighbors who were 80-year-old, Portuguese immigrants, and they were, being surrounded by all of us young, noisy families, moving in and renovating and all, everything everyone was doing on the street. And they were one of the few families left who really embodied this like very beautiful porch culture. They would sit on their porch all day and kind of watch the street go by. They watched us raise our 2 kids in that house. And, I never had we lived there for 8 years, and I never once had a conversation with her because she didn't speak any English at all. But there was definitely a really beautiful, intimacy there with this woman that you see every day, who watches you walk your kids to school and, everything. And so my mind often wandered to I don't know anything about her life, but my mind often wandered to I wonder if it's like nostalgic for her to watch all these young families raising their kids, or if she's just sitting there judging us completely for this modern motherhood that we're all, the chaos we're all in the middle of. And I don't know, but I wanted to write this character who becomes sort of, Mara becomes very much this voyeur on the street. She knows way more about these women's lives than they would ever imagine that she does. And that knowledge becomes quite, pivotal in the book. But yeah, I thought we don't often see, the wisdom of an 80-year-old mother on the page, either. And that I really wanted to just give her that wisdom and that role that she deserves. And, she is so overlooked by everyone, and she resents that for sure. But she also holds this kind of tenderness, in her heart for the kids and for everyone else on the street. And yeah, I loved writing her. She was so nice to write.
So had you written this when the push came out, or what was the timeline?
Yeah. So luckily I had a long stretch. It was, I think, 18 months from the time that I sold the 2 books to the time the push came out. And so I, was obviously revising the push in that time, but I had time to do a very first, very bad draft. As we know, the first drafts are always terrible, but so I had got things underway. And then after the push came out, really kind of dug into the big revising through the pandemic, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So what about now? Are you working on another book?
So I'm working on something. Yeah, I am working on something now. Yeah. So it's so early. I can't say anything about it, but I'm loving it. I'm really, really loving it. Yeah. I've sort of been paused that while The Whispers is coming out to sort of do the press and stuff, but I'm excited to get back to it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, exciting. Are your neighbors ever are you writing about us? Go away.
Well, it's funny. So we just moved neighborhoods. We're not far. We're 10 minutes away from where we used to live, but we just moved this summer. So we're just kind of still meeting the neighbors, which is especially awkward because of this book coming out. But I actually had a message yesterday from a neighbor who was like, hey, Ashley, it's, Michelle from down the street. I'm just reading your book. And I'm thinking, oh God, she's not going to invite me to the next backyard party after this. It's not going to happen. We'll see.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Have you thought about doing anything from the point of view of the men? I mean, I know sometimes we get little glimmers into them, but it might be a neat, I don't know, audible companion, or I don't know, something just to dig a little deeper. I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about Jacob in particular, and just
I love that. I love that idea. Yeah, I actually had at one point during my revisions, I'd written some scenes or chapters that were actually from the perspective of some of the men, and Ben and Jacob. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. In the end, I kind of, had changed directions and didn't need that anymore, but it actually was helpful to kind of just write those scenes and those chapters from their perspective. And, get more into the minds of them, because while we get the perspective from these four women, like their husbands all are very important characters. We just don't get their point of view. So yeah, I think I'm definitely interested in that. Yeah, I feel like I really know these men very well in my mind. Yeah.
If you want, you could take all those chapters and just throw them on Zibby Mag. We could say,
yeah,
these are the
that's
forgotten
right.
chapters. Like, what about the men?
Yes, no, it's true. No, I would love that. Yeah. Yeah. I think they each have their own distinct story too.
Oh, well, there you go. So interesting. What advice do you have for aspiring authors?
Oh yeah, I was trying to think this morning of the advice that I gave last time, and I can't remember. But I think I think the advice that I love to give most, that I think has been really important, advice for myself, is like there's that phrase, like, dance like no one's watching, and I think you really need to write like no one is going to read. I think that has been a real guiding thing for me, clearly in these very dark books. I really think you have to just not worry about what people are going to think, and not worry about like exactly who's going to read this, and write the scenes you really want to write the characters you really want, to explore, and just kind of go there. And I think if we can do that, we can go to some really moving, interesting, deep places. And as a reader, that's what I want to read. I want to really read the truth on the page. So yeah, that's my best advice, is just pretend no one's ever going to read it.
Love that.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, I feel like I have to go somewhere else. Like I have to get out. I have to just take my body and go somewhere else, maybe to reflect that I'm about to go somewhere else, sort of intellectually or something. I don't know. I can't do it in the same spot as I do my work.
I totally agree with you. And I'm the same. I hardly ever write at home, and I need to be out somewhere else. And I think actually during the pandemic, when I just found it so difficult with the kids at home to do anything, let alone try to be creative and come up with stuff and, all of that. Once the hotels opened, here just outside of Toronto, I was lucky to every once in a while go for the weekend away and just marathon write. And I would find that being outside of the city, even just outside of this, it's like something opens up in your brain, and you really can just feel like a total license to just write completely differently, get completely different new idea. There's a refreshing thing about that. If you can manage to do it, it's like a kickstart, for writing. Yeah.
For everything.
It's just it's true. Yes.
Anyway, do you have any exciting tour? Is there anything on your tour you're so excited about, or a stop that you haven't made before, or just something fun?
Oh yeah, I'm excited about a few things. There's going to be the very first a literary festival or a book festival happening in Columbus, Ohio this summer, and I'm going to be doing that, which I'm really excited about. And then actually I'm going to the UK to promote the book when it comes out in July. So I'm very excited to go to London, and there's some fun stuff happening there. So I'll look forward to that.
Are you coming to my bookstore? You have to go to my bookstore.
Oh, are you going to LA? I'm not. LA's not on my schedule right now, but no. I would love to come to your bookstore. I've loved following along with that whole journey that you're on and all the success.
Well, I know that's completely inconvenient from Toronto, but if you ever get out there, or you want to make a stop, or you're going that way, please do an event there. We would love it. It would be.
I would love that. Thanks, Zibby. Thanks for all the support. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, have a great day. Congratulations. And I will be cozying up finishing your book tonight because I cannot stop reading it.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Zibby.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.